Good evening. Welcome to tonight's election forum. My name is Lauren Williams, Adult and Community Services Manager for the Columbia Public Library, which is part of the Daniel Boone Regional Library System. We are glad to be co-hosting tonight's forum. A bit of Zoom housekeeping before we begin. If you have questions for our candidates, you can type those into the chat. If you hover down at the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat icon. Just click there and type in your question for our candidates. Now I'd like to welcome our moderator for tonight's forum, Mari Scala. Mari is a Columbia Boone County League of Women Voters board member and a Columbia Boone County Board of Health member. Thank you, Mari.
Certainly. Thank you. And I want to welcome everyone here this evening. As Lauren said, this is a League of Women Voters candidate forum co-sponsored by the Columbia Public Library. And tonight we're focusing on the general election contested candidate races for Boone County Sheriff and for Circuit Judge that will both be on the ballot on November 3rd. The rules that the League operates under, and as a 501c3, we must cancel any forum for a race that only has one candidate present. And although we have been extending invitations to both candidates for sheriff beginning in August until now, candidate Blair is not participating in tonight's forum. So the other candidate, the Democratic candidate, Sheriff Carey, has been invited to stay to the end of the forum, and we'll then have a conversation with him, which he gets to share his background and his reasons and plans for running for sheriff, but it won't be a full-blown forum. So at this point, we will shift gears and switch over to present the candidates for Circuit Judge, Circuit 13, Division 4. Josh Devine is the Republican candidate, and Andy Hirth is the Democratic candidate. Each candidate will have time for a 2-minute opening statement, followed by several questions. We have some prepared for me to ask, but we very much welcome questions in the chat, as Lauren said, and hope that you will post some questions for the candidates. Sharon Schneeberger is our timekeeper. So she's going to be holding up a 30-second warning and a 1-minute warning. We're going to go in ballot order for the opening statements, which means that the Republican candidate will go first because we have a governor from the Republican Party at this time, and that's how they set up the ballot. We will go in reverse ballot order for closing statements, and we'll alternate for the answers to the questions. So, Mr. Devine, we'll go first. You can present your opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Mari, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for inviting me and Mr. Hirth to talk with you all tonight. We look forward to a robust debate. Andy and I are former law school classmates. We're friends, so I'm sure it'll be a good debate and it'll be fair, and we'll treat each other with great respect as we always do. I currently serve as your circuit judge in Division 4 for Boone and Callaway counties. I previously served as your associate circuit judge here in Boone County in Division 11. Serving as your judge is the greatest honor of my professional career. It's a great honor for me for a lot of different reasons, but chief among them is the fact that I grew up right here in mid-Missouri. I grew up the son of a law professor at the University of Missouri. I went to Columbia Public Schools, as did my wife, Christina. I graduated proudly from Hickman High School. She graduated from Rockbridge High School. That's the source of quite a few conversations at our house, as you could imagine. As I grew up here, I started off at an early age going to the courtroom that my dad kept at the law school. He was a trial practice professor, and I spent a great deal of time with him there. And so not only did I grow up in this community, but I also grew up in this legal community. My dad taught many of the current practicing attorneys here in this community. He served this community with great honor until he passed away in 2010 for 30 years at the law school, and imparted on so many people in this community the importance of the rule of law and the administration of justice. And it's something that I'm very blessed to have been a part of in his life for my entire life. It's what I grew up with at the house. And as I say, being able to go to law school with him at an early age, and that just continued on to my decision to go to law school myself, and as I continued on in my professional career, and eventually having this opportunity to serve the community that I love so much. So again, I look forward to a good discussion tonight, and very much appreciate everyone allowing us to speak to you this evening. Thank you.
Mr. Hurth, it's now your turn for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Mari, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and the Daniel Boone Regional Library for hosting this forum, and to Judge Devine for participating in it with me. As he said, we are old friends, and it's nice to be here talking with him and with you. So my name is Andy Hurth. I'm a constitutional lawyer here in Columbia, Missouri, and I'm running for judge because I want to have experienced litigators on the bench in Boone and Callaway counties. Practicing constitutional law for over a decade, both at the Attorney General's office and in private practice, I've tried at least a dozen cases, both bench and jury trials, and I've argued more than a dozen appeals in state and federal court. One of my appeals to the Missouri Supreme Court returned over $50 million in tobacco settlement funds to Missourians. I've represented hundreds of clients in my career, including former Governor Jay Nixon, Secretary of State Jason Kander, and State Auditor Nicole Galloway. At the AG's office, I defended the constitutionality of state laws, curbing municipal court abuses in St. Louis County, and allowing students in Kansas City to transfer to neighboring school districts when the city schools lost accreditation. In private practice, I've challenged Columbia Public Schools' use of isolation rooms to discipline children with disabilities, reinstated a rural police chief who was fired without due process, and stopped a state representative from blocking her constituents on Twitter in violation of the First Amendment. I also had the honor to teach constitutional law at Mizzou. We need to elect judges with real trial experience and demonstrated commitment to the rule of law. As a constitutional lawyer, I've dedicated my career to holding government officials accountable for overstepping their authority, preserving the fundamental rights guaranteed in our state and federal constitutions, and leveling the playing field between the weak and the powerful. I want to continue that work from the bench, and I'm asking for your vote on November 3rd. Thank you.
Okay, I would encourage the audience to post questions in the chat, but meanwhile, we'll forge ahead with our pre-prepared questions. And the first one, and I'll ask that Mr. Hurth answer this first, and we'll continue to trade off as we go along. What will you do to address chronic racial and economic disparities in our legal system?
You know, unfortunately, this is a problem that plagues the United States, and we're never have seen it more in the news, I think, in the last few years. There are a number of ways that the justice system needs to deal with this, both in terms of disparities in criminal sentencing, but also in terms of setting bonds and allowing people of color and minorities to have the same access to the legal system, to counsel, and to being released in preparation for trial as everyone else. And so that's something that I'll be looking at as a circuit judge. Most of the bonds are going to be set by associate circuit court judges, but if there are bond hearings to change bond, that's something I'll be interested in, is whether somebody can, if they cannot make the payment that would allow them to bond out, looking at other means besides cash bail.
Mr. Devine, do you need me to repeat the question, or?
No, I'm okay if you're okay.
Okay.
All right. So let me talk to you a little bit about what happens in my courtroom. One of the biggest issues that we see, that I see as a circuit judge, is a disparity that can sometimes arise with the issue of bond. And I have bond hearings every single day that I conduct criminal court. Every Monday I do a criminal law day, and I have a multitude of bond hearings. And where the issue of disparity comes up is typically on a lower level, nonviolent drug offense. People that are charged with a lower level drug offense will typically get a bond set at $4,500 or $5,000, something in that range. And where the disparity happens is there are people that look like me, to be honest, that would be able to post that bond, and there's folks that are in a different economic situation that are unable to post that bond. And when you have two people that are treated differently, that is, one can post bond and one cannot, simply because of their socioeconomic status or because of their background. My job is a simple one, and that is to level the playing field and to make sure that a person that should be able to be out of custody pending trial is in fact allowed to leave the jail on an ROR, which is a released on your own recognizance bond. And that's how I handle cases every day in my courtroom.
Thank you very much. So for the next question, we'll ask Mr. Devine to go first. How has COVID-19 negatively impacted our local judicial system, and what can be done to mitigate those harms?
That's a really great question. And the biggest thing that COVID-19 has done is resulted in delays in justice. And delay is the ultimate enemy of justice. Myself being a seasoned trial attorney, Mr. Hurth being a seasoned trial attorney, we both understand the way that things can go wrong in the courtroom when time is allowed to elapse without a case moving forward. And what COVID-19 has done has prohibited, made very difficult, calling up juries, bringing juries to the courthouse, because we can't have so many people sitting in the courtroom together. We've worked very hard. I came onto the bench in July, and I'm proud to report that we are now back to doing court trials at the courthouse. I have a trial set next week, a jury trial, and we've created precautions so that people feel comfortable as much as they can in a large space. We have a very large courtroom that can safely accommodate people sitting 6 feet apart with masks on, sometimes face shields along with masks to make folks feel as comfortable as possible. But that allows us to balance the interests of the public in feeling safe and protected from COVID, but also the very real interests that folks that are in custody have in having their case move forward as quickly as possible so that their rights are not violated.
Thank you. Mr. Hurth?
Well, I agree that one of the main issues with COVID has been the delay in trial settings. My firm had several trials set for the summer, all of which had to be postponed. But in addition just to the trial settings, it's also been an issue in terms of discovery. We have found that it is sometimes difficult to get all the lawyers on the same page to conduct a deposition if you can't do it in person the way we normally do. Or also there's just been a delay in getting documents. Everything seems to take longer if you have to go through multiple people who can't be in the same room. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is just trying to figure out ways to use the technology. Things like Zoom and some of the other formats that the courts have used have been really effective. I've had, I don't know, half a dozen appearances this summer, all by Zoom from this room, which is a very interesting way to practice law. In some respects, it's nice. I get more work done because I have more hours in the day that I'm not traveling. But it has been difficult. And I think particularly for trial lawyers, it's difficult because so much of what we do is based on our rapport with the jury and seeing a jury's face. And that's something that's difficult to do if everyone is going to be wearing masks. So we're all going to have to adjust to that.
Okay, thank you. The next question, Andy Hurth will go first. Mr. Hurth, what has been the most challenging legal case you have worked on?
Wow, I think probably the most complex case I worked on was a multi-state case involving 46 states and the largest tobacco companies in the country. As you may recall, back in the late 90s, many of the states entered a settlement with tobacco companies to recoup some of the harm, the money that has cost the state to deal with tobacco-related illnesses. Well, there's been a dispute with the tobacco companies every year since then as to how much money the tobacco companies should have to pay the states. Missouri gets about $150 million annually from the tobacco companies. And when I was at the Attorney General's office for about 4.5 years, we argued as part of this massive case. Missouri was the first state to have its hearing. There were going to be 46 separate hearings about this amount of money that we were owed. After 4 years of litigation and appeals to the Missouri Supreme Court, I'm happy to say that the court ultimately ruled in our favor and held that the arbitrators, that the tobacco companies rather had withheld $50 million, about $54 million from Missourians. So I'm very proud of the ruling that we got from the Missouri Supreme Court to return that $54 million to Missourians.
Mr. Devine, what's been your most challenging case?
The most challenging cases that I've handled have been as a judge. When I was an associate circuit judge, I handled the rent and possession docket. And I thought coming to the bench that the most challenging situation I would have would be sentencing a criminal defendant. It's a weighty and important responsibility, one that I take with the utmost seriousness. I'll tell you though, working with folks in the rent and possession docket, people that have lost their home, in many cases through no fault of their own, that are coming to you, that are asking you for help, and your job is to apply the law, and there's very little you can do in that situation if the rent hasn't been paid. And so the most difficult situations that I've encountered as a judge have been those in which I have to follow the law, I have to fulfill my obligation and my oath constitutionally, which oftentimes means that somebody is not only leaving the courthouse unhappy, but in a very real instance, losing their home, their livelihood, because of a ruling that I've made. And the weight on you in doing that is just huge, as you could imagine. As an attorney, I handled complex litigation, handled an $8 million construction defect case involving 24 to 25 different parties. I've handled wrongful death litigation involving very serious injury that resulted in the death of people right here in mid-Missouri, and it's tragic and very difficult to handle those cases because of the real human element that's involved.
Thank you. We have a question from the chat, and that's going to be, you'll be the first to answer, Mr. Devine. I'm going to kind of rephrase the question so that it applies to both. So one of our listeners wants to know about what is your current position and how long have you been doing your current job?
Good question. I appreciate you asking it. So I currently serve as the circuit judge for Division 4 in Boone and Callaway counties. I was appointed to that position by Governor Parson in June of this year. My appointment came after the retirement of Judge Azell. And frequently and typically a governor wouldn't appoint into a position like this where there's an ongoing election. I happen to have the benefit of having served Boone County as an associate circuit judge in 2018. And I think if you talk to the people that practiced in front of me in that role, they thought I did a very good job, and word of that got to the governor, and the governor was faced with a very difficult decision, and that is in one of the busiest counties in the state, in Boone and Callaway, one of the busiest circuits. Do you leave a spot open where we already have a substantial backlog of cases resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, or do you appoint somebody in there that can get the job done and move cases right away? And that's exactly what I've done. I hit the ground running and was able to, and have been able to very proudly move cases very efficiently and manage dockets and get disposition done on criminal cases. And then also move civil cases along. So that's my current role.
Thank you. Mr. Hurth, would you describe your current role and how long you've been doing this particular job?
Sure. I am a partner at a law firm here in Columbia called TGH Litigation. I founded that firm with two women that I worked with at the Attorney General's office in February of 2017. Since we opened, we have served about 400 clients, I think, total little more than that. And we do predominantly discrimination law, disability discrimination, and gender discrimination and race discrimination cases. But we also do a fair amount of other constitutional cases involving the First Amendment or due process, that sort of thing. So we're what we call a boutique litigation firm. We are trial lawyers, and most of what we do is in the courtroom.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions in the chat at the moment, I'll go ahead and ask another question, more general question. If you should win this election, what do you expect will be the greatest challenge facing the court?
I think that's addressed to me first, if I'm remembering our order.
That's correct.
So the biggest challenge facing the court, I think, is just the huge amount of cases that are going through it, the backlog because of COVID, and then also in particular the backlog related to, in the criminal setting, to the public defender's office, which there is a waiting list. Many people who are charged and cannot afford counsel of their own and seek counsel from the public defender's office, they wind up having to wait sometimes months at a time until there's a lawyer available to to take their case. And so I think that's, as Judge Devine said earlier, delay is one of the biggest enemies of justice. And I think that that's a really challenging thing here in Boone County, is trying to manage all of those cases and make sure that everybody gets the representation that they are constitutionally entitled to.
Thank you. Mr. Devine?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree 100% with what Mr. Hurth said. Two of the biggest challenges are not only the backlog of cases as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, but the additional impact that the public defender wait list has had just in terms of delays. As we know, that the public defender's office is overburdened and underfunded. They do phenomenal work, but there's only so many of them, and frankly, the resources, the financial resources, have not been there for a long time to hire much needed additional attorneys. But let me touch on something else that I think is a great challenge in our community. The thing that I see with the criminal justice system is that there are so many people who feel like they have not had their day in court. And so when we talk about efficiency and moving cases, we have to be mindful of the fact that there are very real livelihoods behind those cases. And trying to understand each person that comes before you, trying to understand their particular situation and how they came to that situation, best helps you try to figure out whether in this moment there's an opportunity to send somebody to treatment court, to have some sort of alternative sentencing, alternative to prison, whether somebody can be rehabilitated in the community such that prison would not be required. It allows you to do those things that would be necessary to treat somebody as a human being. And so I think that is a great challenge as well that we have, is making sure that people understand and feel like they've had their day in court. That is tremendously important, and that's what I try to do every day.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question in the chat, and we'll make this our final question. And we'll start with you, Mr. Devine, on this one. The question is, how will you ensure that you make yourself aware of or sensitive to the impact of your decisions on other stakeholders in the justice system, such as clerks, the sheriff, and jail, etc.?
It's a great question. And the most important thing that I do as a judge is I listen. And so not only do I make myself available to folks, I actively reach out to individual stakeholders that have different situations, that have interacted with the criminal justice system in different ways. I've developed a very good relationship since I've come to the bench. We just happened by coincidence to meet one another with an individual who was wrongfully convicted. And I don't mean, somebody has later said that this person's entitled to a new trial. No, a judge has actually said this person was put in prison for a long period of time and should not have been there. And the reason why I developed a relationship with this individual is because I feel it's so important to understand what the circumstances were that led to that situation. I need to understand it so that I can try to ensure that that type of dynamic doesn't happen again in my courtroom, that situation doesn't arise. I think it's important to meet with law enforcement officials. Sheriff Carey's on. I've had numerous conversations with Sheriff Carey about what he is and what he does rather, and what it is that I do and how I can help the county from a administrative side of things in terms of making his life easier. And so there's active stakeholders in our community, and the way we work together is by having conversations, and those are the conversations that I've actively had, not only since I became a judge, but also in leading up to this.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hurth?
Yeah, so when I worked at the Attorney General's office, I had the opportunity to work with courts all across the state, and so got to know lots of different clerks' offices, and really gained an appreciation for how different the different clerks' offices are, and how much work that they have to do, and how organized they are to keep all of that work flowing. And our clerk's office here in Boone County and in Callaway are incredible. And so I look forward to working with them. Also at the Attorney General's office, I defended a number of cases involving the Highway Patrol officers, and also corrections officers. And so when I represented those individuals, I would go to the prisons. I went to the JCCC, the Jefferson City Correctional Center, took a tour, saw the cells, saw the administrative segregation, talked to the warden. You know, I think it's important to see the place that you're going to be sending people if you're sentencing, to understand the kinds of conditions they're going to have. And then, you know, probably the most sobering experience I had at the Attorney General's office was being involved in the sign-off, in fact, on an execution that the state of Missouri carried out while I was there. During that process, the Attorney General and the Governor's office are on the phone throughout the entire process. And the prison asks, is there any legal impediment? And the Attorney General's office, or the representative of the Attorney General's office, has to say whether there is an impediment or not. So having sat through that experience, it was very sobering, and gives me an appreciation for the ultimate power that the state has in the criminal system, and how it needs to be wielded, if at all, very, very judiciously. And so that we don't have cases like Mr. Devine talked about, where people are sent to jail who shouldn't have been.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now have 1 minute closing statements from each candidate in reverse ballot order. So Mr. Hurth, you'll go first.
Well, thank you. And again, thanks to the League of Women Voters and to the Daniel Boone Regional Library for having this forum. Thank you to Judge Devine for being here. As he said, we're old friends, and it's nice to see him, even if it's across Zoom and not in person. We haven't had a chance to have lunch at Booch's lately, so hopefully we can do that when the pandemic clears up a little bit. But the final thing I would really want to say is that, you know, both myself and Judge Devine, I think, are well qualified candidates. Boone and Callaway County are going to be well off regardless of who they pick. I think that I have the trial experience that would be useful in this role, understanding of the rules of evidence, civil procedure, and having argued so many appeals, I understand the way things go wrong at trial and can avoid those things. So I think that in this kind of race, experience does matter. And I would urge Boone and Callaway County voters to vote for the candidate that has trial experience, jury trial experience in both state and federal court. Thank you for this opportunity, and I ask for your vote on November 3rd.
Thank you. Mr. Devine?
I want to echo what Andy said and share his sentiment. He's a friend, and I'm so glad that with things going on in the world and what you see on debates, that he and I are able to sit here and be friends and to talk to you in that way. It's really refreshing. As a trial attorney, I handled cases at every stage of the litigation process, from the inception of a case, from that first conversation with a client, all the way through the appellate process. I argued cases before the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. As a judge, I've presided over thousands of cases. I did so as an associate circuit judge. I handled rent and possession cases exclusively. I handled a vast majority of the civil litigation that was filed in Boone County in the associate division in 2018. I've also presided over thousands of criminal cases as an associate judge and now as a circuit judge. In that role, I have developed a great deal of passion for not only service to people, but to understanding the role that I play in this process of ours. My job is a simple one. My job is to make sure that every single person that appears in front of me has a full and fair opportunity to be heard, and that they're given a fair shake regardless of their background, personal experience, or life experience. And that's what I do every day, and that's what I'm committed to doing for Boone and Callaway counties as we move into the future. I'm honored, as I said at the outset. I'm humbled, as I said at the outset, for the ability to serve you all, and I hope to be able to do so, and I would ask for your vote here on November 3rd.
Okay, well, thank you very much to both of our candidates for circuit judge. We appreciate your participation. We are now going to move to a candidate conversation with Sheriff Carey. As I explained at the beginning, but some people may not have heard, we had intended to hold a forum, just like the one we just held for circuit judge, but with questions from the audience. But since we only have one candidate present with us, we're not able to do that kind of format. And so we've asked Sheriff Carey to please stay and share some time with us just in conversation about, this would be your opportunity to share who you are and your background and why you are running for another term as sheriff, what you feel you would bring to the office. And we'll just 5 minutes or so, if that's fair,
Sure.
ask you to give us a little talk.
Okay, thanks, Mario. I appreciate it. So first of all, thanks to the League of Women Voters and Columbia Public Library for hosting the forum. Second, I just kind of want to echo what both candidates said, Andy and Josh, along with some of the comments that I'm seeing from the chat. You know, it's so refreshing to me to see two individuals act professional, running on their own merits versus the negative stuff that we're seeing on the television screen already with other statewide, the mailers that, you know, we're all getting in the mail. And so I appreciate people who can run on what they have done in their past. And so I just want to thank you guys. I enjoyed listening to both of you. So both professionals, I appreciate that. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Born and raised in Boone County, 53 years old, graduated from Hickman High School since then, obtained undergraduate and graduate degrees in criminal justice administration from Columbia College. I have a lovely wife, Leslie, of a little over 27 years. We have 3 great kids that have grown up on us far too fast, twin boys that are 26 and a daughter that's 21. And Katie's getting ready to graduate from Westminster this year, and then she'll be attending A.T. Still medical school. So we'll keep her relatively close at about an hour and a half away. So we're excited about that. As far as job, started with the Sheriff's Department in 1989 in my senior year, actually did an internship with the Sheriff's Department. At the time, I kind of wanted to go into the Missouri Department of Conservation. I wanted to be a conservation agent. I love the outdoors. I love hunting. It's something that I share with my dad. But I did that internship, and it was like a family atmosphere. And I know that sounds a little bit corny, but they treated me so well there. They let me ride along. I shadowed in the jail, and they had an opening that I applied for, and I was hired as a detention officer. We were called correction officers back then. And worked in the jail, transferred to the road. I've spent time as a corporal, as a sergeant, lieutenant, captain. I was the enforcement branch commander for years, the SWAT commander for years. And so, it was around 2003, I was approached about would I be interested in running for sheriff? And I'd never had really thought about it. You know, we had a dynamite group of people. I knew some other candidates that were going to be interested. You know, talked with my wife and made the decision that I was going to make a run for it. And we won in 2004. So I took office January 1st of 2005, put a great team together, dynamite admin team, along with, I don't like the word supervisors, so I use leaders, which we want to lead. We don't want to supervise, we want to lead. So when you hear me say leaders, I'm talking about our sergeants, both in the jail and on the road. So, you know, comprised a good group to get started with. Talking points back in 04, I wanted to be proactive. You know, Ted Boehm had really brought us out of the good old boy days into a professional law enforcement agency. And then I wanted to take us even farther into that professional arena, I should say. And so one of the things I wanted to be more proactive. So we started and have expanded a traffic unit that does a lot of hazardous moving violation enforcement, DWI enforcement. We started our Internet Crimes Task Force. Andy Anderson had been doing that for a while, basically working, you know, trying to protect our children from these sexual predators, and it's primarily centered around children. And so we started our Internet Crimes Task Force, I believe, in 07. We partnered with the Columbia Police Department and the University Police Department and developed a crisis intervention team program to help with those that are in mental health crisis, so we can communicate as law enforcement officers better. And so instead of just arresting, where we might be able to divert or get treatment, that type of thing. And so we continue to do that today. And we've expanded that into our 911 dispatchers, EMS, fire. So that program continues to blossom. And by the way, before I forget it, anyone that's listening, I would encourage you to go to my website, which is reelectsheriffcarey.com, and you can see a lot of these accomplishments on the website. The other thing that I'm pretty proud of, before I get into the accreditations, is we started our own K9 program. And so to give you a little history on that, it used to be where when we started our K9 program years ago under Ted Boehm, you know, you might have to go to the middle of South Dakota to get training, or down to Indiana. It was a long ways away. You lost your deputy for a long time. It cost a lot of money. So I had an individual named Chris Smith, who is one of our K9 handlers, that really fit the mold to be a trainer / instructor. And so we sent him off to get all of his, not only state, but national certifications. And we started our own training program for K9. So obviously that keeps our folks close to home. It's more affordable. But then we expanded out to other departments. So right now we're doing we're training about 30 other agencies, their handlers. And so the neat thing about it is, not only are we getting, you know, we're up to 4 dogs at the Sheriff's Department, but not only are we getting really good training close to home, but it's also a revenue builder, which, you know, you don't see that very often, where we're basically self-sufficient when it comes to our K9 program, plus we're putting money back into general revenue. So that was a pretty neat program that we started. Obviously, Violent Crimes Task Force, we're partners with Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, Columbia Police Department, University Police Department. We're doing great work with the task force, more than probably what the public knows. And I can't get into a whole lot of that, but it's a good group, and they're doing a lot of great work. And probably lastly, I'll talk about the two national accreditations. We tried to get some media coverage over the last year or so, and it's been kind of tough. So again, that's why I appreciate Maria having me. NIJO, the National Institute for Jail Operations, is obviously a jail accreditation. It's a national accreditation that we were awarded late summer last year down in New Orleans. And it's based off of not only state law, but some case law, some appeal law, and it's 128 standards that we have to meet in order to receive this national accreditation. And so, again, we were awarded last summer. We actually just had our first annual assessment, and I'm really proud to say that our detention staff received a 100% rating, and that says a lot about the work that they're doing. And as you can imagine, they have been challenged beyond belief since March with the COVID pandemic. And knock on wood, we have not had an active case in the Boone County Jail since it started. And a lot of that, of course, blind luck, but a lot of that is attributed to the work that staff does disinfecting 24/7. The second accreditation is through the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, and it's on the enforcement side of the department. It's 181 standards. It's something that we started back in 2016, not too long after Ferguson. And a little backstory on that, after the incident in Ferguson, just kind of seeing the movement of, I won't necessarily say society, but you know, where it used to be, I could say we've got a great department and everybody believed it. Now it seemed like to me that you needed maybe a higher authority to kind of corroborate what you were saying. And so 30 seconds, come on, Sharon. Anyway, the command staff wasn't on board initially. They love it now. Ryan Lear, our accreditation manager, has done a great job with that. We were awarded in late July, and just, you know, and everywhere I go and every radio that I'm on, I always talk about, and I'm going to end with this. I have a dynamite group of employees that do a great job every day. We have a simple motto: we treat everyone how we'd like our mother to be treated. It works really well for us. And so, again, I'm excited to be a part of it. I'm also excited to lead, just, again, a great group of people. So I'll tell you the biggest difference in this race, it all comes down to experience. There's one candidate that has supervisory experience. There's one candidate that has personnel management experience. There's one candidate that has jail management experience. There's one candidate that has budget experience, and there's one candidate that has executive experience. And the most important, one candidate has on-the-job experience, a proven track record as your sheriff for the last 16 years. I thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And thank all the candidates for participating tonight, as well as all the community members who participated. And in addition, we want, of course, a special thanks for Lauren Williams with the Columbia Public Library for facilitating the Zoom forum, which the forum has been recorded. It's going to be posted by both the Columbia Public Library and the League of Women Voters on our websites. So if you have friends or relatives who weren't able to participate tonight, please spread the word that they can still listen to the recording. We remind you to vote by absentee or mail-in ballots, or to vote in person on November 3rd. The League also has a digital voter guide, which is available on our website, that has information about all the different races that are affecting our county. So thank you all very much, and good night.
Thank you.